interesting story you have. Give me a little background on Recon and what you're all about.
Sure. We're looking for underexplored areas in the world with the potential for large discoveries of oil and gas. In particular, we noted how the shale revolution has changed things so much in the oil and gas industry in the United States and in Canada and to a lesser extent Argentina and Australia. But the opportunities for those sorts of discoveries exist all over the world. And Namibia came out very high on that list. A very large basin in the northeast corner called the Kavango Basin. We took a license for that area, and now we're moving ahead to explore it.
What ReconAfrica is coming to do in Namibia is ecocide and genocide. Our San people, they are foragers. The food will be taken away from them. So ReconAfrica can reap profits. To what extent do our lives matter that we have to put ourselves on the front line so we can continue fighting this injustice that is being perpetuated onto our people, onto indigenous people all over the globe? What did we do to deserve this injustice? The fossil fuel industry is busy invading our homes. If these practices go on, there won't be a planet left.
Hello everyone and welcome. As you have all seen from this video, the situation is very critical at the moment. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And before going forward, I'll introduce myself. My name is Alejandra. And the reason that we're going live today is because today a group of protesters, including members of the local Koe and San communities, are beginning a nearly 1,000-mile walk to the Namibian embassy in Cape Town to protest against the drilling in the Okavango Delta. So today we will begin the first of our series where we'll be following over the next 10 days and looking at what's happening on the ground, following the protesters, as well as talking to experts about the systems that are enabling the ecocide and genocide and the climate collapse that is going on right now. And we will also explore alternatives and solutions to many of these very complex but important issues critical for our own survival. In this first episode, we are very lucky to have Kofi Mawuli. He's the co-vice chair of the Stop the Maangamizi We Charge Genocide Ecocide campaign, and he's also the coordinator of Extinction Rebellion's Internationalist Solidarity Network. He will be joining us live today, and we hope to hear from him and learn more about the neocolonialism and also for the need for internationalist solidarity to combat the systems driving these issues. But before going on to that, we will hear from some of the courageous activists on the ground, both the protesters marching, but also people in Namibia. And first, we're going to play a video of the protesters themselves that will embark on the 1,000-mile walk to the Namibian embassy.
Welcome to Nice Now over the screen. I'm Q7, one of the walkers that is going to walk from Naisna to Cape Town in defense of the Okavango Delta.
Let us stand together to save the Okavango River and the basin there. There's drilling going on there. We need to stop that and ReconAfrica not to continue with what they're doing.
We don't like it and we don't need it in Africa.
We're working for my people's space where they stay, you know. So yes, I plead for like ReconAfrica. I stand against the fact that we are drilling in that area.
We're asking everybody, please stand up with us, sign a petition and say no to ReconAfrica and yes to life.
Let's do it for Kavango, because we don't need the drillings in our land anymore.
We will unite. Thank you.
Thanks for your support.
No drilling on the Okavango Delta.
Wallah Rastafari.
So it's great to hear from the people on the ground, and we wish them all the best in the beginning of this journey. For many of you who are probably watching this, the Okavango Delta is probably something that people will have heard or seen Attenborough special or safaris, and that's kind of like the image that people have on their mind of diverse ecosystems and animals. However, while it's common knowledge that the Okavango Delta is home to numerous critically endangered species, something that is perhaps less well known is that the Okavango Delta is the birthplace of humanity itself. Local communities in this area have been living in harmony with this ecosystem for as long as we have been humans. A threat to this land is also a threat to our shared collective human culture, and not to mention a direct threat to the livelihoods of the thousands of people who have called the Okavango Delta their home for generations and derive their livelihood and meaning and sustenance from this ecosystem. And now the Canadian company ReconAfrica is threatening to destroy all of this. And they've already begun drilling exploratory wells with the intention to start large-scale operations, all which will be overseen by the so-called father of fracking. And under a cloud of accusations, including corruption, disinformation, intimidation, ReconAfrica is hoping to extract up to 31 billion barrels of oil for just profit, to already really rich people and investors. As such, it's no surprise that UNESCO, among many of the community members that we've been lucky enough to see so far, have raised the alarm and made a point to stand up against oil exploration and exploitation of this type, because doing this will most likely lead to the displacement of local communities, widespread water contamination, and untold damage to the ecosystem, and globally will contribute massively to the climate crisis. As such, something like this would just be ecocide and genocide. With ReconAfrica's offices in London, it's hard not to see Recon as the legacy of the system that brought us slavery in the first place, a system that is only wanting to seek short-term profit at the expense of the livelihood of thousands of people. And ReconAfrica is using this wealth, their money and their power and their lawyers to silence the people who will be most affected by their operations. We really hope that in this series we're able to hear from people themselves, but it is important for everyone watching this to know that people on the front line are being faced with increased persecution and threats to their lives, intimidation. As such, many of them are simply afraid to speak on camera. Here, before we get to talk to Kofi, we will hear from Ina, and she is in Namibia, and she's been very courageous and has sent us a video from the front line, and I hope that everyone watching this also thinks about the risk that she's taking just for recording this video, just for putting the face out there. And I hope that that's something that people, when watching this, take this in mind.
I pay homage to Mafikile, who was gunned down in her home for opposing a coal mine in KwaZulu-Natal. I pay homage to Kensarowiwa in the Ogoni 9, who were hanged 25 years ago for opposing the projects in the Niger Delta. I pay homage to my father today, Pondo Yanangobe, who lost his life 39 years ago for fighting against apartheid in Namibia. I pay homage to all the defenders of human rights, of environmental rights, and we will not stop. We will not stop, and we will get ReconAfrica out of Namibia with your help. We will not let this become another Niger Delta. We will not. We also want to live in peace. We also want to thrive. And we can only do it if we stop the fossil fuels and transit to renewable energies. Stop the fossil fuels.
Hi, Kofi. It's great to have you here. Before going forward, Kofi's told us that his connection is not very great at the moment, so he will be turning the camera off and we will be hearing his voice. Before starting, Kofi, could you tell us a bit about who you are and what your background is?
Ali, you've already introduced me. I'm not very fond of saying too much about myself, but I can say this. I was, I describe myself as a Pan-African community advocate for global justice, and have worked in various formations, largely African heritage community-based formations. And also the Pan-African and global justice movements. I was born in Ghana, and I've been an activist since my youthful days. Actually, before even I was 10 years old, I was drawn into activism against injustice. And that also has seen me having to live, a number of decades now, in exile, away from my beloved, homeland of Africa. I am also very much part of the indigenous resistance of my own community of the Beto in West Africa. And we're actually battling very much like, the indigenous communities, in the Okavango, Delta, against the attempt to now transform the mountain range, the Vetogwika mountain range, which is our home, into a place for mining lithium, and very much determined, like, the indigenous communities to ensure that this does not happen. So I identify very, very, intimately with what the indigenous communities in the Okavango Valley are on about.
I think just hearing from you, and I think most of people watching will relate, this is something that just seems to, it's a story that seems to repeat itself again and again and again. And it's like a common pattern. And I think this is where probably colonialism, neocolonialism plays a role. And I was wondering, from your experience so far, as you said, you've been an activist against these type of injustices for a long time. What would you say is the common driving force behind all of these injustices?
From what I have learned and experienced, what I see is the inordinate, selfish, bloodthirsty lust of a few to take whatever they think will make them, will enrich them at the expense of all forms of life on the planet, even at the expense of the planet itself, right? They have no respect for anything, no kind of life. And it is only they who matter, in terms of satisfying needs that, is satisfying what not even basic human need. So they'll try those who, are actually fighting to survive in.
Hi, Kofi, sorry to interrupt. The sound is breaking. Maybe we might need for you to take away the camera. Let's try now.
Yeah. So that for me is the problem, of a few who, they actually are racialized. They racialize themselves as white from Europe mainly. But one of the things that we need to understand is that they impose this system of extractivist exploitation and deprivation of the majority of their own people, and then have been exporting this across the world in the form of colonial dispossession of all indigenous people, and imposing a system, what I call global apartheid, racism upon the rest of the world, which manifests itself, in the fascist form of global apartheid racism. Yeah, so it is yes, it is capitalist in the sense that it is just about enriching a few at the expense of the many, but it's also exported across borders, and completely disrespects everything else on the planet, right? And that is the colonialism of it. It takes, it disempowers people, takes control of territory, violates everything sacred, to everybody, right? And then it's all to please a few. And the thing is this, what they use these colossal amounts of money they make from destruction of all forms of life is senseless. Building mansions, amassing cars, jet setting across the world, causing further, destruction of the environment through pollution, right? And the challenge really is, for how long are we going to allow ourselves to be divided and conquered by this predatory few, right? Who are incorrigible. They're not making mistakes. It's not that they don't know what they're doing. They have absolutely no regard for human life. And people who stand in their way are arrested, brutalized, and even murdered. And that is why, yes, it is genocide. It is ecocide, because it's not just killing human beings, it is now killing everything, and now we are at the historical juncture where if this continues, we will lose the entire planet. That is why one of the things that I'm really glad about is the determination expressed by INA, on behalf of the indigenous communities, that they will get Recon out, they will not stop, and that they will do everything possible, to win against these kinds of predators. And this is really what we need to be hearing. And these are the people we must support. But more importantly, we need to connect internationally so that we will make it impossible for these kinds of predatory forces to continue what they're doing. And Recon, wherever they have their offices, particularly in the global north, it is an obligation for all who care about human life to act in solidarity with those who are being, whose lives are being destroyed, whose environment is destroyed, by ensuring that Recon finds no place of peace to operate anywhere in the world. And that is what will teach them, listen, so long as, when it comes to the point where they have no place to operate this, business of genocide and ecocide in the world, that is when that business will collapse. And we can make that happen.
Definitely. I think hearing from what you've said, that connection across communities is critical, because otherwise, okay, if you win a battle in isolation by yourself, then what is stopping ReconAfrica to go, to another country? Let's go to South America or go to Southeast Asia and then do exactly the same thing. And I think that brings me a bit to a second issue I wanted to talk to you, is that often people see this as a local issue, right? When I've sometimes talk in the street with people about this kind of things, they say like, oh, it's in those countries that those things happen, like it's because they have local corrupt politicians and stuff, and trying to bring, into the public consciousness that idea that it's an internationally organized system. And I was wondering, Kofi, Like, I guess you've already alluded to it, but, you know, what could you say to the people who often dismiss this kind of things as a local problem?
Well, the point is that, you see, we live in a world where those who seek to perpetrate this kind of crimes against humanity and against Mother Earth, one of the first things they do is to deny people knowledge, deny people the relevant information, you know, keep them in ignorance or, you know, obscurantism, and therefore control their minds so that they don't have any real understanding of the system at work. Okay, and they can look at things in very compartmentalized ways. So this is supposed to be a local problem right now facing just the indigenous community of Okavango. But this is the same thing happening, you know, in the Niger Delta. It's happening, you know, in other parts of Africa. In Ghana right now, we have, you know, not only this, in West Africa, not only the Betogika Mountains of my community spreads across West Africa, but it's not only that. You know, there is the Atiwa forest, you know, which the current government of, you know, headed by this corrupt Akufo-Addo is insisting on mining bauxite, you know, so destroying that whole ecosystem, right? Which will actually destroy the sources of water, you know, even for the capital city of Accra, you know, in Ghana. So we are seeing a situation where they're not local issues, right? Because almost all indigenous people are under threat one way or the other. If it's not happening, it's being planned for you. And it's part of this whole agenda of depopulating, you know, the world of certain types of people. And that is why, you know, from this coloniality of power, because that's where it all started. It's colonialism that dispossessed people of their land and seized their territories, you know, to be owned by others, right? And therefore impose upon those people ways of relating to, you know, the environment, ways of relating to mother. That actually is the desecration of their own values, because they never relate, as you quite rightly said, for thousands of years. People have obeyed certain, you know, principles, live their lives according to certain values and principles. And amongst them is the sacred nature of, you know, the earth, the sacred nature of the environment, right? That is why even in indigenous cultures, there's reverence for water, there's reverence for mountains, there's reverence for trees, you know, there's reverence for even animals. People don't see their own lives as you know, they don't elevate their lives over and above that of everything else in nature. You know, that is what has kept the planet, you know, how it has been, right? And now we have people who come take the land completely away from these people, like in Namibia. Yes, you know, German colonization, you know, followed by, you know, the British and South Africa. It's what has deprived these people of the right to determine what happens on their own territories, okay? And this coloniality of power didn't change with the proclamation of independence. In fact, Namibia saddens me, because in the long struggle against, you know, the apartheid, the South African apartheid, you know, regime that was handed over Namibia, you know, in the struggle for independence, I went to university with some of the people who are currently running government in Namibia, who made all kinds of promises, right, about the liberation of, you know, Namibia and handing it back to the African people, only for these people, you know, to become actually stooges of foreign corporate interests, right? And who are black faces in a system that is still, you know, one of global races, and they are the ones perpetrating, or they are the ones facilitating these crimes being committed against their own people. And that is why we have to totally examine the system of neocolonialism, because in this current, historical, stage, what we have is all systems, all ways of dispossessing people, right, is now opening the road to eco-fascism. Because we have these few people who know they've destroyed the planet up, to the point where, people talk about tipping point of where we may never recover the planet. Now they are saying that, okay, let's get rid of, undesirable, beings, so that the planet, for whatever is left, it can be enjoyed only by them, And that is the real danger that neocolonialism and all forms of the abuse of power today, if left as it is, is just taking us straight to eco-fascism. And this is why the challenge is for us to build a global anti-fascist front to stop, the further escalation of the situation where the response to the climate and ecological crisis by this, oligarchy in the global north, is the eco-fascist destruction of everything else, in their pathway. And so the stakes are extremely very high. It is not just a problem for the indigenous communities in the Okavango Delta, because this is happening across, particularly the global south. And, most indigenous communities are in the same situation. And this is also the time for us to unify, because you see, and the emergence of formation like Extinction Rebellion in the global north tells us that people are becoming aware in the global north also that the destruction of the environment in the global south, right, does, not end there. Because, the climate is one and the same. The air we all breathe is one and the same, right? The planet is indivisible. It is an organic whole. So it's like a boomerang. If you think you can go and destroy the environment in some corner of the world, that boomerang will come back to hit you, right? And many people in the global north are now waking up to the reality that these kinds of, crimes committed in places like the Okavango Delta, which is about to be committed, the ones committed in the Niger Delta, the ones committed in the mines of Abiyala, right? The destruction of the Amazon forest. In the global south, all of this, has repercussions, on, the destruction of lives in the global north as well. And of course, many are saying this, which is true. The pandemics that are now threatening people also in the global north, have their root causes, in some of the criminal actions, like the destruction of the environment. They're rooted in the climate and ecological crisis that we are facing. So, fortunately, we have a world where, you cannot say that you are going to, shut yourself in one corner of the world and forever breathe air. That is exclusive to you alone. So these are global problems, and we need to unify people's actions, particularly those of indigenous communities, of resistance, and rally around them all other forces of resistance in rebellion for life. And that should be the response to this situation. It's a global problem, and it needs a global solution, which our unified forces across the world are capable of providing.
Thanks, Kofi. I wanted to, you mentioned about what's happened in the Niger Delta and in people watching this, the video that we showcased at the beginning had some snapshots of currently what the Niger Delta is like. And I was wondering, Kofi, if you could talk to us a bit about what happened there, a bit of the historical context, and also what parallels or what lessons or what can be built up from that.
Well, the thing is that the Niger Delta story is a particularly very painful one, in the sense that Ken Saro-Wiwa, who, provided intellectual leadership to the fight of his Ogoni community against Shell's destruction of the environment of the Ogoni community and of other communities in Niger Delta from oil and gas, extractivist, exploitation, was somebody known to me personally. I met him here in London, and actually in a conversation I did, forewarn him about what would happen. And he dismissed it off and said, well, he's just a writer, using his pen, and, he's not, he has no guns, he's not building armies to fight anybody, he's just advocating, against the destruction of the environment and the lives of his community, hoping that the world will listen, Africa and the rest of the world will listen. And, I still said, be careful, Ken, the forces you are up against, they have a very bloody, track record, and it really hurts me to know that, though I didn't wish it, these things did happen. And what it was simply in the, when the government of Nigeria, then led by, an army officer called General Sani Abacha, a very, very wicked, man, who was in the pockets of Shell. So actually, it was Shell that masterminded the bloody repression of the Ogoni and other Niger Delta communities of resistance. And when it couldn't, hold back, with repressive brutalization, their resistance, resorted to trying to decapitate their movements of resistance by framing the likes of Ken Saro-Wiwa and 9 other, people who were providing intellectual leadership, to the mass resistance, and got them, put them on trial on trumped up charges, and then executed, by hanging, which was one of the saddest things that have happened in the history of indigenous community resistance, in Africa and the world. There were people who, made desperate efforts to save the lives of Ken Saro-Wiwa and his colleagues, but of course, battling, being up against Shell wanted to demonstrate to the people of the Niger Delta that, what would face them if they persisted in their resistance. And of course, they had the entire, corporate establishment, behind them, even though appeals were made to the Commonwealth at that time to intervene, because Shell is a British Dutch-owned company. It didn't work, and, these people were killed. And their blood still is on the hands of this corporate, oligarchy, right? And I'm glad that the indigenous communities, in the Okavango Delta have already learned from that lesson. Because what is happening also is that these corporations, go, to various parts of the world and actually march in front of them governments that go to communities to say they are bringing them development. They are bringing them, the kind of development that they see in the shining cities of London, New York, Paris, and elsewhere. And that if they just let them take control of their resources, then they will get the good life, right? And this is the propaganda. And these regimes of neocolonialism that are just puppets, agents of, these corporations, right, actually help them to peddle these lies. And I am actually highly impressed that the indigenous communities in the Okavango Valley know this truth. Like so many others, have learned it the hard way, that no, we don't want your kind of development because it is maldevelopment. It is not in our interest. It will destroy us like you've destroyed so many other places and people across the world. And I think that this is brilliant, right? That, these lessons are being learned and passed on. And this is what we need to encourage. This is what we need to promote. Because people like Ina, who are standing up in the front line, putting their lives on the line with hardly any resources, okay, but except their own intelligence and courage, right, and respect for who they are and for what surrounds them as Mother Nature, okay? They are risking their lives and trying to raise the consciousness of their people not to believe these lies. And my challenge to people in the global north who have all the resources, all the facilities to get any information at the touch of, anything, any gadgets, of modern day electronic technology. These people need your support, right? They need your concrete support in terms of providing them with the information that challenges and being with them to challenge the lies being peddled by these neo-colonial puppet governments that line up, behind these corporations to deceive ordinary people that they are bringing them development, they are going to make them wealthy and lift them out of poverty. But again, what is poverty? Right? What is poverty? When people are living in literally pristine natural conditions with clean air, right? With all the resources from Mother Nature available to them, right? And they're not leading this kind of, artificial, lives that people lead in these glittering cities, in that they're glittering, but they're rotten to the core. They don't want many indigenous communities know about these glittering lifestyles and they don't want them, right? But then you have these governments and corporations that might even take a few of their young people and miseducate them, right? To come back to be saying that, oh, give up, on your territory, give up on your nature, so that, you hand it all over to these corporations to destroy. Now, go to all kinds of places. I can take you to the country of my birth, Ghana now, and you look at what mining, what extractivism has done to destroy, all the things we held precious and sacred in nature, right? This is happening in many parts of the world. So but I would want to have a situation where all these, academics and scholars that are dazzling, people in the global north with facts and figures about the climate and ecological crisis, right? I will want a few of them to go to the Okavango Valley today and work with the indigenous communities, so that they can reinforce what their own indigenous knowledge is giving them with the modern scientific knowledge that they have, right? So that they can out-argue, reckon, and the government of Namibia before the entire international community. If we created a system whereby any corporation that appears in any corner of the world, wanting to exploit resources, is brought before an international community panel to be questioned, right, and challenged by the local community in terms of the promises they make. If we can create that transparent system of exposing the corruption of not just, these political actors in our global south, but also those who are behind the corruption from the global north, right? And expose the lies they tell about so-called development, right? And question the long-term prospects of anything these corporations are doing. I think that, a lot of these problems will not be there. So I think the challenge is really, up to the people in the global north, because our people in the global south, with their own indigenous knowledge, with their own experiences, with whatever they have, right? They are fighting in defense of their land, in defense of themselves, in defense of their lives, of all lives around them. But we have this colossal global machine, of lies and violence, which is deployed against them. And if only the people of the global north, cared not only for what will happen to them in the future, but also cared for what is happening to the vast majority of people on the planet right now in the global south. The unity we can forge will put a full stop to this nonsense, end ecocide, and give us all, a better planet to live with. So I throw this challenge back to the people in the global north watching this right now. The people in the Okavango Valley, like many, many other indigenous communities, are doing whatever they can, right? But where is international solidarity to strengthen their efforts and make them to defeat ReCon? That is the question we need to be asking.
And Kofi, what do you think is stopping people, let's say, for example, in the UK, where I'm usually based, or in many countries in the global north, from embarking on this action on international solidarity?
To be quite frank, I still ponder about this question. But from what I have studied and what I have come to know from living both in the global south and now here in the global north, I think the main problem is obscurantism, right? And obscurantism because many people in the global north don't critically analyze the misinformation that is peddled to them. And this misinformation starts from the home, where, many are brought up with prejudices stemming from lies about what is really going on in the world, right? And then in school is worse, with systemic indoctrination in lies, okay? So, if you go to study any discipline, even in a university, apart from, the doses, of, intoxication with lies you get in primary school and secondary school, when you get to university, it's even worse, right? These academics who pretend they know everything, they have all the humanities and sciences, at their disposal. They work wonders, right, with knowledge. But the wonders where they work, most of them, not all, most of them, the wonders they work is to, actually embellish half-truths with big lies. And unsuspecting young people who go through this miseducation in schools, colleges, and universities are programmed to be tools of the destruction of lives in their own selfish interests, because they're made to feel that you are an individual, make a success of your own life, and nothing matters, right? And so you have these people who are programmed to be killers, either killers in the field, when they go serving in the police and armed forces and security agencies, or killers at their desks when they are sitting in their corporate offices and manipulating, gadgets, right? To be destroying lives everywhere, okay? So this is the system that we have. And until, as always happens, courageous people spring up, stand by, and tell the truth and act to challenge the lies and, become an example to others to wake up their consciences, right? And we have many more people of conscience stepping up to see beyond the lies and then find common cause with, those being oppressed, terrorized, and murdered. But the wonderful thing about Europe is that in its history, it has always had people like this who, in spite of the widespread nature of the big lies of empire building, of terrorizing others, to death, of crimes of genocide and ecocide, you always have this group of people who, initially small, but persist to stand on the side of oppressed peoples across the world, and through sheer determination to stick by and let the truth prevail, win over the majority of public opinion. And then these ruling classes are forced to make concessions. As an African whose ancestors went through the horrors of chattel enslavement, I know, because I've been interested in that history, right? How many people initially challenged our enslavement and then, pointed to our humanity because we were expressing that in our own anti-slavery resistance. And then eventually the public in Europe woke up to see that it takes human beings to recognize their humanity and fight to be human, right? And that is how the big lies of chattel enslavement were defeated. And when that was replaced by direct colonization, again, the same thing happened. So I am convinced that once we persist in exposing the big lies of neocolonialism. Once people can see how the attempt to continue empire building through neocolonialism, how that is, even a worse, bloody exploit, because we thought people would have learned better from the crimes of chattel enslavement of African people. They would have learned better from the crimes of direct colonization. But no, some people are determined not to learn anything, right? But the majority of people, particularly in the light of the climate and ecological emergency, are being forced to critically look around them and realize that when the amazing forest is burning, it threatens life not just in the global south, but also in the global north. That when the Niger Delta is polluted, the gas being flared and the, flames and the toxins are also heading straight back to the global north, right? And in the same way, people already know, some know, and many more need to know, that if we allow the Atiwa forest in Ghana, the Vetogbika mountain range in West Africa, and the Okavango Valley Delta in Namibia to be destroyed, then actually, you are allowing yourself to be headed to the slaughterhouses, of ecocide, even in the global north. And that is why formations like Extinction Rebellion, with their strengths and weaknesses, are rising up. And as you know, we in Extinction Rebellion International Solidarity Network, we say that, if we globalize resistance and connect, all localities of resistance, and unify communities of resistance to merge rebellion, then there will be enough of our people's power unified to stop the destruction and to win back planet Earth. So for me, the challenge now is how we can rally around the Okavango Delta communities, link them up with the Niger Delta communities they themselves know, link them up with those in West Africa resisting at the encroachments upon the Vetogbika Mountains from our Beto community, link them up with those challenging all forms of extractivist plunder, and then connect them to other global south communities of resistance. And the formations are emerging, to do this. We have not only the beginning of putting together the Majority World International Solidarity Coordinating Committee of Communities of Resistance, but we also have the emergent global majority versus UK government action of young people from the global south who are living in the global north, right? And it is important that the communities in the Okavango Valley connect into these formations, right? And we then strengthen our global might, so that these global mights can be brought to bear on local situations, so that Recon knows that it is we confronted in the Okavango Valley not just by the communities there. It will be confronted by all communities of resistance from the global south and the global north in the Okavango Valley Delta. This is where we have to go. or I would say this is where we have to return. Because in the anti-colonial struggle, what made our predecessors to win significant battles was their increasing global solidarity and unified actions, expressed in things like the Bandung Conference and the emergence of the Organization of Solidarity of the Peoples of Africa, Asia, and America Latina, OSPA. These things were created decades ago by our predecessors, and that's why they won significant anti-colonial battles, like Vietnam winning the war against US imperialism and its allies, right? The anti-apartheid struggle was fought not just by Africans. The entire progressive humanity from the global south and the global north rallied. And even though the victory is limited, there's still significant gains made. And rather than retreating from these traditions of international solidarity, now is the time for us to retrace our steps back to the best of those traditions, learn from them, and do better, because that is what our ancestors, those who walked this earth and made these examples, this is what they are, asking of us, that we do even better than them at international solidarity, that we reclaim the human family, that nobody seeks to gain from an injustice to any one of us, that an injury to one is an injury to us all. In the same way, a victory won anywhere in the earth, on the earth should be claimed as a victory that strengthens all of us. And I think that is where we are at. Sometimes we talk as if some of these things have never been done before. In the experience of the peoples of the global north, there are beautiful examples. And I talk about the resistance to the Vietnam War, because on 30th of April, we are launching, upon the initiative of the XR Affinity Network of Asia, the Peace Lotus International's Day of Anti-War Resistance. And this is where the indigenous communities in the Okavango, Delta, and all across the world, just like the 12th of October, Indigenous Peoples Resistance International Solidarity Day, and the 1st of August, African Emancipation. We all need to rally around these dates to plan and carry out global action. We are proposing that for COP26, instead of people rushing for photo opportunities with the deceitful governmental delegations that will come to Glasgow, we rather refocus attention on an international solidarity action in the global south, so that we reinforce the confidence in ourselves to be the change, and not keep on running, after these useless, heads of state and governments, begging them to change the world for us. We have enough lessons from the fact that they will never do that. There's a lot of greenwash, scamming going on now, where, they are making claims that they are proposing Green New Deals and, all kinds of things. But, can you imagine, at the same time that they are making this, declarations, the people of Okavango Valley, the Delta, as like many others in the global south, are faced with new threats to destroy their lives. How do you square this up? How do you square the greenwash nonsense that is coming from Boris Johnson and other governments of the globe north, including, Joe Biden, who has just come up with Kamala Harris and all these, deceitful imposters? How do you square up the declarations they are making with what is happening to the indigenous communities in the Okavango Delta? How do you square that up with what is happening to our Beto communities, around the Vetogika Mountains in West Africa? How do you square this up with what is happening in, the red corridors of India? Right? So we can see that their lies, are enough to drown all of us. And if we believe their lies, then, we will be finished. But if we believe ourselves and believe in each other and believe the truth we are telling each other, and then use that to build our own unified people's power and develop, structures of, merging our rebellion and supporting each other, we will become the power they dare not, disobey. So we turn the scales, right? Instead of us running after them and begging them to do us favors, they will come begging us because they will be terrorized by the power we wield. So it is, I hope that this is an opportunity for those in the Okavango Delta to realize that they, instead of being victims, they can put themselves in a most powerful position where not just the government of Namibia and those governments in the SADC or the African Union, but the governments of the global north will tremble at their might, because in the communities in the Okavango Delta must be seen all the communities of humanity who are standing together with them. And that if you dare injure those communities, you face the wrath of all communities that constitute peoples of conscience on the planet. So I think that this rather than, us see only dangers, we should also see opportunities in what Recon is threatening the Okavango Delta with. Because this could become their Achilles heel. This could become the turning point. If all of us unify and say, you dare not, right? The Niger Delta will not happen in Okavango Valley, in the Delta, right? Because we are there with them. We don't have to be physically there in that Okavango Delta, but we are with you here in London where you have your Recon offices. There are, people on the side of the communities of the Okavango Delta who will deal with you. Non-violently, but also firmly, to reject your ecocide and call you out for the perpetrator of eco-fascist crimes that you are. And it is this, which will make them stop and take us seriously. If we keep on running after them and going to these jamborees of theirs like COP26, where they throw, they actually delight in our protests, right? Because it is just photo opportunities for a few people to say, yeah, when it was COP26, I was there. Well, what did you achieve? What could you have achieved with liars? Criminals who time again and again turn this into jamborees to laugh at all of us, where we waste enormous energy saying we are, activists. And NGOs make themselves rich, right? With funders from these very same corporations turning up these people to come and, demonstrate, in jamborees that mean nothing. But what about if, at COP, when they are gathered at COP26, we actually desert them? We are not there at their party. We no longer play their game. We rally, if be it, say, in the Okavango Delta, with the communities there, right? And that's where we hold our COP, right? And force the international media to shift its eyes from, the COP26 to where we are gathered, because we are the majority, right? So these are the challenges we need to be throwing to this establishment, and their attitude will change when we no longer do their bidding. When they, we say how high when they tell us to jump. When we don't regard them as the ones who have the solutions. When we believe in our own power and ability to be the change we are, desiring. They will eat humble pie and come crawling at our knees, on their knees before us, because the power they know we will wield as a unified humanity, wanting nothing but Mother Earth, our Mother Earth, that power alone of our unity will frighten them to allow us to do the bidding of Mother Earth and take humanity away from the brink. The challenge is, do we have the courage to act like this? And if we can have that courage and wisdom to act in this way, that is the best support and solidarity we can express to our brothers and sisters of the one human family in the Okavango Delta. Thank you.
Thank you, Kofi. Indeed, I could not think of a better way of ending this. I think throughout the many different things that you've talked about, I think it reminded me of, I remember a moment I heard a lady from the Ecuadorian Amazon saying that one of the oil companies that came to their land to drill, they told them that, hey, why are you guys so problematic, making so much fuss? Don't you see the indigenous people up in North America? They've given their territory and there's lots of oil and they're really happy there. They're doing very well. They've got their roads, they've got this, and the lady in the Amazon said that they couldn't really lie to her because she had built some connections. She had managed to meet some of the indigenous people from North America. And they told them that indeed that was all lies and that they are suffering greatly from all of the extractivism and the lies. And it just made me think just that great big lie that is fed to people all across the world, which is that lie of like development, and development will bring you your happiness, and all the ecocide and genocide that it's perpetrated day by development. And I think one of the also key things and final things that I got is just that there is a rich history of resistance, that the fight against this system is a very old fight. People have been fighting this for a long time in all sides. And it's really important for everyone to tap into that rich history of resistance, of internationalist solidarity, and find that power, because if anything, change has not been made by, begging others to give you what you want, but you actually taking it together, organizing. So Kofi, thanks for everything. And everyone who's listening, I hope that you've all learned and felt as inspired and empowered more than anything. I hope that everyone listening to this, taps into the very own power that all of us have. And I look forward to seeing you for the next episodes. We will discuss a wider range of topics from ecocide law, the role of journalism, politics, and we'll end with reparations. And our next episode will be on Wednesday at 6 p.m. GMT. And it will feature Jeff Barbee, who's the journalist that broke the Recon story in National Geographic. And we'll hope to hear from other people in the ground, but this depends on connection. So we'll keep you posted. Just check our Facebook event page for more details. And this series will be on YouTube channel. And thank you everyone for watching. And thank you, Kofi, so much for your words and being here with us.
Thank you. Bye for now.